Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to explore a question that really it touches every aspect of our lives, from the biggest nations right down to our smallest communities. What does it truly mean to lead? And maybe even more profoundly, what does it mean to be governed? We often think of government as something strictly political, something sort of outside of us. But what if it's also a divine gift, a profound capacity that works through people? Today we're embarking on an incredibly impactful deep dive into the gift of governments. We'll be drawing profound insights from ancient biblical texts, looking at specific examples, full verses, scripture references, things that illuminate how leadership and governance are understood from a spiritual perspective. Our mission really is to uncover practical steps and powerful takeaways for anyone who leads, serves, or, simply lives within a community, helping you see these dynamics with fresh eyes.
Yeah, and it's truly fascinating to see how these texts frame leadership. It's not just presented as a human endeavor, a skill you pick up through training or experience. It's something more. It's presented as a divinely appointed capacity, a spiritual gift, and with that comes immense responsibility and very specific purposes. So as we unpack this, we'll explore what that means for how we view authority or in the grand scheme of nations, but also in our daily lives, workplaces, homes, how it shapes our own engagement with leadership, whether we're the ones leading or the ones being led.
Okay, let's unpack this right away then. This concept of governments, it isn't just about political structures. What's truly remarkable, I think, is that it's explicitly identified as a spiritual gift. It's mentioned right alongside other, pretty powerful spiritual gifts in the Bible. For instance, the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 28, let me just quote it directly. And God hath set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, diversities of tongues. Think about that for a second. This verse places governments, and we can understand that as, the spiritual capacity for leadership, administration, the ability to guide and manage effectively. It places it squarely within the spiritual framework of the church.
Right. It's not just to learn a skill or even just natural talent, although those can certainly be, boosted by it. The real insight here, I think, is that the ability to bring order out of chaos, to steer a group effectively, it isn't just good management technique. It's presented as a divine endowment, just as essential, just as supernaturally empowered as a miracle or a healing gift.
Which really shifts our understanding, doesn't it? From leadership being solely about human capability to it being this profound spiritual endowment, which demands both, humility and immense responsibility. And if you've ever seen someone naturally step into a chaotic situation and just bring immediate order,
Yeah.
or manage a really complex project with what looks like effortless grace, or guide a group towards a common goal with remarkable clarity and wisdom.
Yeah, you might just be observing the spiritual gift in action. It's that intuitive, divinely backed capacity to lead and organize, making sure things run smoothly and, importantly, align with a higher purpose. It implies a kind of supernatural empowering for effective, insightful leadership within a community.
Definitely. Purposeful leadership.
Yeah, and if we connect this foundational understanding, this idea of governance as a spiritual gift to the bigger picture, we find something even more profound. The very first mention of government in prophetic scripture, specifically in Isaiah, points to a very specific form of government. And crucially, a specific leader. It really sets the divine standard, gives us a glimpse into God's ideal. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, very famous passage. It declares, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." And then verse 7, "Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this."
Wow. That's quite a statement.
It is, and what's truly fascinating here is how it establishes this future monarchy, but under a divine ruler, the Prince of Peace. It's not just any monarchy, it's portrayed as the perfect one. And notice the core tenets: judgment and justice. Those are foundational.
Right.
This passage suggests that the highest, the most efficient form of government, when you have a truly good monarch, one who embodies perfect wisdom, absolute justice, unblemished righteousness, it's actually a monarchy.
Interesting.
And in this ultimate sense, Jesus, referred to as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, perfectly embodies this ideal. His reign is described as one of endless peace, continuous increase, built entirely on righteousness and justice that will never end. He is the ultimate flawless monarch whose rule brings not just order, but profound peace and equity.
So, okay, with this divine ideal in mind,
this perfect vision of governance set by God himself. How do human governments, with all their, complexities and competing interests and, frankly, undeniable flaws, how do they even begin to measure up against that kind of standard? That's a perfect lead-in. Before we dive into humanity's many varied attempts at governing ourselves, let's really establish the fundamental purposes that any government should ideally serve. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're presented as universal aspirations for, well, the flourishing of any society. Our source material puts it quite clearly. The purpose of government should be to promote the common welfare, to ensure domestic tranquility, and to establish and enforce laws that will guarantee the common welfare of the society. And importantly, government should seek to eliminate the evil and to preserve the good.
Those are profound goals, aren't they? Foundational. They define a high standard, a measuring stick, really, against which all forms of rule can be assessed. Monarchies, republics, whatever form it takes.
Exactly. And as citizens, recognizing these core purposes gives us a crucial framework for evaluating our leaders and the systems they operate within. We can ask ourselves, genuinely, what specific policies or actions are truly contributing to the common welfare of all people? Are they genuinely fostering domestic tranquility or maybe creating division? Do the laws being made and enforced truly aim to eliminate evil and preserve good for everyone? Or do they serve narrower interests, maybe even hidden ones?
It helps move beyond just partisan talking points, doesn't it, to a more fundamental assessment of what government is actually for.
Right, which leads to the question, where do human leaders come from? What makes some so effective?
Well, this naturally brings us to that important question. Where do human leaders actually come from, and what makes some seem so remarkably effective? Our text suggests that some individuals are simply, well, gifted with a natural aptitude for leadership. Some are described as gifted with the gifts of government. They often appear as natural leaders. They have a compelling personality or demeanor and leadership to which people are attracted.
You see that, don't you? Like gifted musicians or mathematicians, some people just get leadership.
Exactly. It's presented as God giving people these special aptitudes and giftings, a natural ability to organize, to inspire, to strategize. However, and this is a big however in the text, the highest use of these gifts is stated as being to glorify the Lord and for the profit of the whole body, meaning for the benefit of the entire community, not for personal profit and gain.
So it's about the motivation behind using the gift.
Precisely. If someone uses these powerful leadership abilities purely for self-glory or personal advancement or to accumulate power and wealth, the source likened it to prostituting the gifts that God has given them. It's seen as a perversion of their intended purpose.
Wow, prostituting the gifts. That's strong language.
It is. So a critical practical step for all of us, really, whether we're leaders or just members of a community, is discovering and recognizing our own unique gifts and then intentionally using them for the greater good, for the welfare of others, not just for our own advancement.
Have you ever seen someone with incredible talent, maybe in any field, use it purely for self-promotion or personal gain? Perhaps even causing division or harm along the way.
Oh, sure. And how does that starkly contrast with someone who uses their abilities to genuinely serve others, to uplift their community, maybe even at personal cost? The difference in their impact, their legacy, it's often profound.
That's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? The intent behind our gifts. Self-promotion versus common good.
Yeah.
But beyond individual leaders, how have humanity's collective attempts to organize and govern themselves played out historically? We've seen so many different structures.
Well, throughout recorded history, humanity has indeed tried countless forms of government, each with its own structure, its own underlying philosophy, and, as we'll see, its inevitable challenges. We've witnessed the progression from early forms like feudal serfdoms, where local kings ruled over small villages or cities, gradually developing into broader monarchies governing entire regions and eventually nations.
Right.
Then came more complex constitutional forms of government, like the Republic in the United States, for example, which operates as a representative form of government. Citizens elect individuals to represent their ideals, make laws on their behalf.
And of course, we've also seen totalitarian forms ruled by dictatorships, often oppressive, with little real say for the people.
Right.
When you consider that vast progression, local kings to empires, then modern republics, or you think about how a republic like the U.S. should ideally function, with elected representatives actually reflecting the will of the people, you realize the sheer diversity, the ingenuity of human attempts to organize society.
Each with perceived strengths and often very glaring weaknesses. but they all represent this continuous, often imperfect effort to bring order, manage resources, structure people's lives.
And this brings us to a really crucial point about how our values, our beliefs, intersect with these diverse attempts at governance.
Delving into this, a fascinating tension comes up between the ideal of representation and the reality of how morality gets discussed or doesn't get discussed in governance. In a representative government, citizens absolutely expect their elected officials to represent our thinking and our ideals, and they should be seeking to promote them. That's the idea.
Sure, that's the basis of it.
However, the source material notes a significant frustration, particularly among those with strong spiritual or moral convictions, when candidates for office often seem to avoid stating clear positions on very important moral issues. You press them on these matters, and sometimes the cry is separation of church and state.
Right, that phrase comes up a lot.
It does, and the source material clarifies a nuanced understanding of it. It explicitly values the separation of church and state to prevent a state church, arguing that historically, state-controlled churches often lead to sad, pathetic spiritual death, losing their spiritual vitality.
Okay, so the separation itself is seen as good in that context.
Yes, protecting religious freedom. However, the text then strongly asserts that this separation does not mean the separation of state from morality, from decency, from common sense, or from the moral issues that make a nation strong or that destroy a nation.
That's a key distinction being made there.
It is, and the critique highlighted in the source is that what it calls the other side wants to impose their will on society concerning things they label low standards, like pornography and abortion rights. Yet those same voices object when others advocating for what is decent and what is pure and what is right seek representation or want their moral framework considered in policy.
So it's pointing out a perceived double standard.
That's the perspective presented, yes. Where one set of values is deemed acceptable for public discourse, but another is quickly silenced by invoking separation of church and state.
So, as a listener, you have to think, how important is it for you to know where your representatives stand on issues defining your core values? Where do you draw the line between a leader's personal beliefs and their public duty? How do you navigate these complex discussions in a civil way?
Exactly. Recognizing this distinction means engaging critically with public discourse. We can value the separation of church and state as a protection for religious freedom, while still advocating for moral principles in governance, understanding that these concepts, while related, are distinct in how they apply.
Okay, but then, where does this leave us regarding human governments in general? Because here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit, sobering. The ultimate verdict presented on all human-devised governments, regardless of their form. The source material gives us a very direct, very uncompromising statement. It reveals a fundamental perspective on human nature and governance. Actually, all of these forms of government that have been devised by man are unsuccessful. Quote, "Man has definitely proven that he is thoroughly incapable of governing over his fellow man without graft, without corruption, and ultimately destroying every form of government that man has attempted. And the reason given, because of greed, man is incapable of ruling over his fellow man in righteousness." Wow, that's a sweeping statement. Unsuccessful, incapable. It's incredibly strong, isn't it? No ambiguity there. It attributes the failure directly to a core aspect of human nature, greed, and this inherent inability to rule in righteousness.
So it suggests a fundamental flaw, something that no human system, no matter how well-intended or perfectly structured on paper, can overcome on its own. It's not just about finding the right political system.
Right, it's about the nature of the people within the system, their underlying motivations.
The analysis points to this insatiable desire for more power, more wealth, more influence, which inevitably leads to moral compromise, injustice, and the eventual decay of any system.
So, if this assessment holds true, what hope is there for society?
Well, it profoundly points towards a need for a different kind of government, doesn't it? Or at least a different kind of influence within government, something that transcends these inherent human limitations.
This profound and, pretty sobering conclusion. It naturally raises the question, if human governments are ultimately unsuccessful because of these inherent flaws, what does work according to these texts?
Well, the texts point very clearly to one specific endorsed form of governance that stands apart from all human attempts. The only form of government that God endorsed and established was theocracy God ruling over the nation of Israel. And interestingly, the very name Israel is interpreted to mean governed by God.
Governed by God. So in a true theocracy, God is the ultimate direct ruler.
That's the ideal presented. Human leaders, like Moses, don't rule by their own authority in this model. They act as God's representatives, intermediaries who are themselves guided and governed by him. The people were meant to be continuously conscious that God reigns and God rules over the nation.
How was that consciousness maintained?
Well, we see it vividly in the Israelite camp formation in the wilderness. The tabernacle, the sacred place of meeting God, was always right in the center of their vast encampment. All 12 tribes were pitched around it, their tent doors facing inwards towards it.
The moment anyone came out of their tent.
They look ahead and see the tabernacle of God, and at night they saw the pillar of fire above it. In the day, the pillar of cloud. These weren't just religious symbols, they were constant, tangible reminders. We are being governed by God. We are God's people.
A continuous visual spiritual affirmation of his direct rule.
Exactly. Setting their entire existence within his divine framework. That constant awareness was foundational.
And God's rule wasn't arbitrary, right? It came with a clear covenant, promises tied to obedience.
Absolutely. The source material explains that God promised power of greatness, of strength, and of blessings to Israel if they will allow me to govern over you, if you will obey my commandments, if you will follow after me. And these weren't just vague spiritual things, they were concrete benefits. Protection from plagues, ruling over their enemies, economic prosperity, like being lenders and not borrowers, among many other societal advantages.
And conversely, what about disobedience?
Well, the text highlights that God also predicted the dire consequences that would come to them when they came to the place where they refused to allow God to rule over them, describing vividly the disastrous results of any nation that rejects his rule. Consequences ranging from famine and disease to defeat in battle, and eventually even dispersion and exile.
So the principle is stark. A nation's well-being is intrinsically linked to its adherence to divine principles, its willingness to be governed by a higher moral authority.
That's the core message presented. Can you think of historical examples or even modern ones where a nation's adherence to or rejection of clear moral guidelines seems to correlate with its strength or decline? The biblical narrative suggests this pattern isn't coincidence, but a direct outcome of alignment with or rebellion against divine governance.
It's a challenging thought. So if God is the ultimate ruler, how did his rule actually manifest through people in this theocratic ideal?
Through gifted men who are gifted by the Holy Spirit. That's the mechanism described. We see a powerful example when Moses, despite being a gifted and divinely appointed leader, became utterly overwhelmed. The burden of leadership, the constant complaints, the disputes, it was too much. He even wanted to quit, basically.
Right, I remember that part.
So, in Numbers chapter 11, verses 16 and 17, God instructs him very clearly. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there. And I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone.
So God empowers human instruments to represent him and share the load.
Exactly. These 70 elders, upon whom God explicitly placed the spear that he put upon Moses, could then assist him in ruling. The beauty of the system, as described, was that these gifted individuals could handle the everyday complaints, filter them, and only bring the most complex or unresolvable issues to Moses.
Who would then take them directly to God.
Right. This multi-layered, spirit-empowered delegation maintained that continuous awareness. God was reigning over them, even as his rule was administered through these human representatives.
That's a powerful practical step for leaders, isn't it? Delegation, empowering others, especially those spiritually gifted.
Absolutely. It's presented as a key strategy for effective, sustainable, and truly godly leadership, all while ensuring the ultimate source of authority remains clear and acknowledged. It's a model of distributed spiritual leadership.
Our deep dive is certainly revealing some absolutely foundational rules for anyone in leadership. Church, business, family, whatever. And the first one is presented as non-negotiable. Incredibly potent. So it's a really high bar. In 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 3, this ancient wisdom declares, The God of Israel said, The rock of Israel spake to me, He that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God.
Must be just, ruling in the fear of God, unequivocal. And the source material really expands on this, stating that any man who does not have the fear of God has no right to rule over his fellow man. He is not qualified.
Not qualified. That's blunt.
It is. Such a ruler, the text argues, will inevitably be corrupt, crooked, and dishonest because they lack that ultimate accountability. The fear of God here implies more than just being scared. It signifies a deep reverence for divine principles, an unwavering awareness of accountability to a higher, perfect authority.
Which prevents self-serving rule, encourages integrity.
Right. Ensures decisions are made with equity, wisdom. For leaders, this means cultivating that profound respect for ethical, divine principles, recognizing their authority isn't absolute.
And for those being led, it provides a crucial criterion for evaluating leaders. Do they demonstrate this deep sense of accountability, this commitment to justice beyond their own self-interest, like a litmus test?
Absolutely. And beyond justice and this profound fear of God, there's an essential work ethic, a consistent posture required for godly leadership. In Romans chapter 12, verse 8, when Paul lists spiritual gifts, he includes ruling, saying, "And he that ruleth, let him do it with diligence."
With diligence. That echoes Proverbs, doesn't it? Proverbs 12.24, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule.
Exactly. Ruling is framed as an awesome responsibility, especially if a leader is meant to represent God or godly principles. Diligence speaks to attentiveness, thoroughness, careful planning, consistent effort.
It's not a casual role then. You can't be lax or inattentive.
Right. Not according to this. It demands persistent engagement, meticulous care in decisions, a tireless commitment to the well-being of those being led. Doing your homework, considering all angles, pursuing excellence.
How often do we see diligence lacking in leadership today? Public office, corporate boardrooms, community groups.
And what are the consequences? Neglected responsibilities, poorly executed plans, erosion of trust. The impact of an undiligent leader can be huge.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings us to the next rule. And this one is incredibly important, highlighted by that dramatic story about Moses. A stark reminder that when we lead, we must do so with all diligence, making certain that we do not misrepresent God to the people.
The waters of Meribah, Numbers chapter 20, a pivotal moment. The people were complaining bitterly, thirsty, regretting leaving Egypt.
And Moses was deeply upset, angry at their rebellion, their ingratitude. God, in his grace, told Moses specifically, "Speak to the rock that water might come forth for them. Speak."
But Moses, in his anger and frustration, lashed out. Numbers 20, verses 10-11. "Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock?" That "we" is significant. "And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly."
God, in his grace, still provided the water. The people drank. But the consequences for Moses were severe. God told him, verse 12, "Because ye believe me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them."
So his great sin wasn't just striking the rock instead of speaking?
No, it was misrepresenting God's character. God was gracious, providing water. But Moses' anger, his impatience, that self-aggrandizing "must we fetch you water," it projected a wrath, a pride that wasn't God's heart in that moment.
And that error, despite 40 years of faithful, often miraculous leadership, cost him the ultimate privilege, entering the promised land. It's a truly stark reminder for leaders. Be acutely aware of your emotional state, your motivations, how your words and actions affect your communication.
Your public persona, your actions, they're not just your own. They reflect on what or who you represent.
How many times have we seen leaders, even spiritual leaders, let personal frustrations or anger cloud their message, leading others to misunderstand the true heart of what they represent?
It's a profound practical step for any leader.
Yeah.
Constantly examine our own motives, our emotional responses, our expressions when we have authority. Ensure we're accurate, humble conduits.
Yes. And building on that crucial point, accurate representation, humility, the very nature of godly rule described, is, well, profoundly countercultural. It's explicitly not really lording over people like worldly leaders often do. Jesus himself taught this powerfully and demonstrated it vividly.
Mark chapter 10, verses 42 to 45. He laid it out clearly for his disciples.
Right. "But Jesus called them to him, and saith unto them, Ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them." Standard practice. "But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, your servant. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all.
Servant of all. And then the reason.
For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many."
He didn't just teach it, he lived it. The foot washing. John 13.
Exactly. "The night he was betrayed, took a towel, knelt down, washed their dusty feet. Afterwards he asked them, You see what I have done? They said, Yes, Lord. And he continued, pivotally, You call me Lord and Master, and that is correct because that is what I am. But if I, being your Lord and Master, wash your feet, then you ought to wash one another's feet.
For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you.
He explicitly stated, I am giving you an example of how you are to rule. It is to take the place of a servant.
Wow. So true leadership in this divine model is about being available, serving needs, not demanding service or wielding power for prestige.
That's the picture. Actively listening, serving needs, not demanding service, not accumulating power for self-benefit. A radical call to humility and selfless service.
Reflect on leaders you've admired, maybe in public life, work, community. Do they embody this spirit of service?
And what's the impact when they do? Putting the needs of those they lead before their own?
Creates loyalty, trust, a thriving community, often. Now, for those who desire a more formal leadership role, say within a spiritual community, the standards laid out are incredibly high, going way beyond just competence or natural gifting. Paul, in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, details these rigorous qualifications for an overseer or bishop. Let's look at that passage. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. Okay, it's a good desire. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? That logic is powerful. Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil.
That is a truly exhaustive list, isn't it? It's not just about skills, it's deep character, tested integrity. That very first requirement, blameless, sets an incredibly high bar, above reproach.
Then the specific virtues: vigilant, attentive, sober, self-controlled, serious-minded, good behavior, orderly, respectable, given to hospitality, generous, welcoming, apt to teach, able to communicate truth clearly.
And the warnings against negative traits are just as explicit. Not addicted to wine, not violent or argumentative, striker, not greedy for dishonest gain, not contentious brawler, not covetous.
And crucially, that ability to rule well his own house, having children in subjection with all gravity.
The logic is presented as irrefutable. If you can't manage your own household effectively, showing leadership and order in your closest sphere, how can you possibly be trusted with the care and governance of God's church, a much larger, more complex household?
And that final warning against being a novice, inexperienced, lest pride takes hold.
It underscores the danger of appointing someone unprepared for the weight of authority, someone susceptible to arrogance.
You know, this isn't just a checklist for formal leaders, is it? It feels like a framework for personal integrity and responsible living for everyone. These qualities contribute to effective influence in any sphere of life.
That's a great point. As you reflect on these qualifications, which do you think is most overlooked in leadership today, and why might that be?
Maybe that ruling way his own house part,
Mm-hmm.
the connection between private life and public leadership.
It seems the internal private life, the management of one's own immediate responsibilities, is presented as just as crucial, if not more so, than the public persona. Indeed. And perhaps the most crucial qualification for any ruler, the one underpinning all the others we've discussed, is a deep, abiding understanding of being under authority themselves.
You can't rule if you're not ruled.
The source material states it plainly, a truth echoing through various scriptures. No man can truly exercise leadership over others unless he is conscious of the fact that he himself is ruled. No man can rule who is not ruled. This is precisely why the fear of God, that deep reverence and accountability to a divine authority, is presented as absolutely essential, a prerequisite.
Like the centurion in Luke 7.
Exactly, a perfect illustration, Luke chapter 7, verse 8. Jesus offered to come heal his servant, and the centurion, a Roman military officer, said, "For I also am a man set under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it."
He understood the chain of command intrinsically.
He knew what it meant to be governed by those above him, therefore he profoundly understood what it meant to justly govern those under him. His authority was derived, not inherent. The Bible consistently establishes these chains of command or levels of authority with God is at the top, the ultimate authority. Anyone not recognizing God's ultimate authority is not qualified to have authority, according to this view, and tragically will likely pervert his authority to his own benefit and become a tyrant because they see no higher court to answer to.
You sometimes see that with judges, maybe, acting like they're the final word.
The text mentions that, yes. Judges acting as gods in their courtrooms, forgetting their accountability to God for their judgments.
And the classic example, Nebuchadnezzar.
The powerful, cautionary example of Nebuchadnezzar, the great ruler over the Babylonian kingdom, Daniel chapter 4, recognized even by God as one of history's greatest leaders. Head of gold in Daniel's prophecy. Superior. But because of his immense greatness and power, Nebuchadnezzar became lifted up with pride. He began to rule out God, believing he was the final authority. No appeal beyond himself.
Famously declaring, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?" Daniel 4:30. Lots of I and my.
Exactly. And what happened? God humbled him, allowed him to experience a terrifying period of insanity, stripped of his kingdom, living like an animal for 7 seasons.
Why?
The text says, to the intent that the living might know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whomsoever he will, and he can set over it the basest of men. Daniel 4.11.
Wow. A stark, enduring example. Until leaders know, truly know, that the Most High rules, they're always at risk of pride, corruption, downfall.
That's the warning, the practical step for leaders. Consistent, humble acknowledgement of ultimate accountability to God, letting that reverence shape every decision.
And for listeners, discerning leaders who show genuine humility, submission to a higher moral authority, not those acting like they're the ultimate arbiters.
Precisely. These rules really shape the character of a leader. But what about the broader ripple effect of leadership on a community?
You've really hit on a critical point there. That ripple effect is huge. Good leadership isn't just beneficial, it's presented as absolutely essential for a community to flourish. And the careful transfer of leadership succession planning is equally vital. We see this so clearly with Moses, recognizing his death was near, knowing he couldn't lead the people into the promised land. He prayed this profound, selfless prayer. Numbers chapter 27, verses 16 and 17. Moses appealed to God, "Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd."
He was prioritizing the well-being, the continuity of his people above all else. Remarkable. And God's response was immediate and specific. Joshua. Numbers 27, verses 18 through 21, details this crucial moment. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. Public affirmation. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. Transfer of authority.
And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word they shall come in.
That mention of the Urim is fascinating, a specific method the high priest used for seeking divine guidance. It confirmed Joshua too would be led by God, maintaining the theocratic principle.
And the key qualification for Joshua, it's stated right there, a man in whom is the Spirit.
Exactly. A man who has the Spirit, a man who is governed by the Spirit, and a man who is led by the Spirit. That's paramount. The laying on of hands by Moses wasn't just ceremonial, it was a visible transfer, a public affirmation giving Joshua credibility, ensuring the people understood that the reign of God continued, even with a new human leader.
Such a crucial practical takeaway for any organization, isn't it? Spiritual or secular.
Yeah.
The immense importance of succession planning. Identifying leaders who are not just competent, but guided by a higher purpose. Unshakable integrity.
Definitely. What qualities do you look for in a successor? How important is that seamless, spirit-led transfer in any group you're part of? It often determines the future of that group.
It really does.
And what's truly fascinating here, and also a profound warning, is how directly a leader's character and choices are shown to impact the entire community, often with devastating consequences. The ripple effect, good or bad, is undeniable. The prophet Isaiah chapter 9 verse 16 starkly warns, "For the leaders of this people cause them to err, and they that are led of them are destroyed."
Cause them to err. Destroyed. That's serious.
Very, and it's echoed centuries later by Jesus in Matthew 15 verse 14. That vivid analogy, let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch.
Both fall. The leaders and the led.
Conversely, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2 paints the contrasting picture, the impact of righteous leadership. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn.
Rejoice versus mourn. Directly linked to the character of the leadership.
It highlights that leadership has life or death implications, sometimes literally, often figuratively, for the health of the community. Erratic, unrighteous, self-serving leadership inevitably leads to confusion, error, destruction, mourning. Their lack of integrity, foresight, or moral compass directly steers the community toward peril.
But righteous leadership, characterized by justice, diligence, service.
That brings joy, prosperity, overall well-being, according to Proverbs. This underscores the immense responsibility on leaders, yes, but also the critical importance for the people to choose leaders wisely, hold them accountable, discern their true character.
The moral compass, the spiritual alignment of those in authority, it directly shapes the destiny and the emotional state of the community.
It's presented as a timeless principle for all societies.
Okay, so while leaders bear immense responsibility, it's crucial to remember the people being led also have a role. It's a dynamic relationship. Requires discernment, but also appropriate submission. The writer of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 7, gives this counsel. Remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow, considering the end of their manner of living.
Considering the end of their manner of living. In other words, observe the tangible fruit of a godly life lived out in practice. Let that be a guide. Discern and emulate those whose lives consistently demonstrate genuine faith, integrity, righteousness.
Paul urged something similar, didn't he? 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ.
Setting the ultimate standard. Follow leaders only to the extent that they themselves are following Christ's example.
Then Hebrews 13, verse 17 adds another layer. Submission. Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves. For they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you.
Now, this particular verse, Hebrews 13.12, it's incredibly important, but it also raises a crucial point because it can be, and historically has been, misinterpreted, even gravely abused. The source material specifically warns against practices like the shepherding movement back in the 70s and 80s, where leaders, tragically, use verses like this to hold people in horrible bondage.
So,
Individuals were often required to seek permission for every personal decision. Buying a car, choosing clothes, who to marry, with threats of spiritual consequences, even hell for disobedience or for daring to leave that specific church group.
that's terrifying. A complete misuse of Scripture.
Absolutely. A perversion of the intent of healthy submission into oppressive control. The key here, the crucial caveat always stressed in the broader context, is that the final authority is God. Always.
Leaders are meant to be servants, not masters.
Exactly. Servants of all, as Jesus demonstrated. Not to hold people in bondage with threats of hell, which the source says is not like our Lord and is not representing our Lord. True obedience and submission to human leaders is always presented as conditional. Conditional on that leader's own obedience to God, their demonstrated servant heart.
So discerning true, godly leadership means watching how they handle authority.
Yes. And if they genuinely represent the loving, freeing nature of God, rather than using fear, manipulation, or control.
Always measure human leadership against Christ's example as a servant who sets people free, not into bondage.
Right. And finally, Hebrews 13, verse 24, encourages a positive interaction. Greet all them that have the rule over you and all the saints.
Encouraging a kind of closeness.
Yes, fostering a bond of love and serving one another and submitting unto one another in the love of Jesus Christ. It emphasizes community, mutual respect within the framework of proper godly authority.
A relationship of honor and support, not blind subservience.
That's the ideal presented.
So how do these profound biblical principles, this theocratic ideal we've been discussing, how does it translate into a practical model for governance today, especially outside a literal nation state governed directly by God? Our texts point towards the church, the spiritual community, as a primary living example.
Right. Many churches today are described as trying to follow sort of a theocratic form of government, recognizing that Jesus Christ is the head of the body, the church. He is the final authority, and all of the decisions are deferred to him.
How does that look in practice?
Well, it can be seen in various ways. For example, church boards or leadership teams that meet regularly. Their purpose in this model isn't necessarily to rule or make decisions based purely on their own opinions or preferences or even a democratic vote.
Okay, so what is their purpose then?
Their mission is described as collectively seeking to find his decision and then to implement his desires. Through earnest prayer, careful study of Scripture, seeking God's mind for the community.
So prioritizes prayer and spiritual discernment in decision-making.
Profoundly. ensuring that human instruments are aligned with what they discern as divine will, rather than just human preference or strategic ambition or worldly wisdom.
It's an active, ongoing, intentional submission to a higher authority in practice.
Demonstrating that God's government, in this sense, can function tangibly within human structures today.
And what's the outcome of that when it works well?
What's truly fascinating and presented as a powerful encouragement is the clear, consistent correlation shown between intentionally seeking God's rule and experiencing genuine, tangible blessing. When a church, or really any community, has leaders who are described as filled with the Spirit, genuinely gifted in governments, who are diligently seeking God through prayer for His direction, His will, and His purposes for the church, that community is invariably described as blessed.
Blessed. Leading to a state of collective well-being, joy.
Exactly. Beautifully described in Psalm 144, verse 15, which proclaims, "Happy is that people," that is, in such a case. Yeah, happy is that people whose God is the Lord.
Happy is that people whose God is the
The
Lord.
joy, the happiness described here, it comes not from worldly success or human ingenuity alone, but from intentionally allowing the Lord to truly be Lord, to truly govern, to guide in His path. It's presented as a profound testament to the peace, the prosperity, the authentic flourishing that come from aligning human endeavors with divine guidance and righteous principles.
Consider how this principle might apply beyond the church walls, though.
Exactly. What if organizations, businesses, even nations truly sought to align with a higher righteous purpose, prioritizing moral principles, self-sacrificial service from leaders, genuine discernment in decision-making?
The potential for societal well-being, for that genuine common welfare and domestic tranquility.
For a people truly rejoicing in their governance, as Proverbs puts it, it would be transformative beyond measure.
It's a compelling vision for how leadership, when anchored in divine wisdom, could truly elevate humanity. Hashtag outro. What an incredible deep dive into the gift of governments, seriously. We've explored everything from the prophetic origins of divine rule in Isaiah, painting that picture of the perfect monarch, to the, well, sobering realities of human governance, how all human-devised systems ultimately fall short, according to these texts, due to greed and unrighteousness.
Mm-hmm.
We've unpacked the profound responsibilities and also the blessings that come with leadership, and indeed, the necessity of wise submission, when both are anchored in the fear and love of God.
Right. We've seen that true leadership, as presented here, is rooted in justice, diligence, accurate representation of what's good and right, and always, always a servant's heart, operating under the ultimate authority of God.
Demonstrated by figures like Moses and the 70 elders, and most profoundly by Jesus himself.
So, if the ideal government, as these texts suggest, is truly one where the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and if that rule comes through gifted individuals who are submitted to Him, then perhaps the most impactful practical step any of us can take is to actively pray for, support, and maybe strive to become leaders who truly embody the Spirit.
Leaders who rule in the fear of God with diligence, never misrepresenting what is good, and always with that genuine servant's heart.
Think about it. What kind of impact could this intentional pursuit of godly governance through humble, righteous individuals, have on your community, your workplace, your family, even the wider world? What if more leaders truly prioritize reflecting God's character in every decision and action?
It's a question that really challenges all of us, doesn't it? To reevaluate our roles, whether we lead, serve, or simply participate in society, and to strive for a higher standard. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the gift of governments. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep digging for those crucial, potentially life-changing insights.